mean, it's not just about the kids. I mean, I'm happy for the kids.
So I think we've come up with the answer to your prayers. This is what I think we're gonna do. We are buying you a house.
How's it going in Mexico?
Are they really gonna build her a new home?
Yeah, for the whole family.
Great films will immerse you into a world that your characters inhabit, and grip you with the stories that are told through great methods of filmmaking. A technique that's used very often, one that most people aren't very aware of, is when the filmmakers show and tell the audience a clear solution to the character's problems twice within the film. This can be done right at the beginning of the film, even within the first act. To show you what I'm talking about, let me tell you about one of the best films that I saw last year. A Quiet Place, directed and produced by John Krasinski. The film creates and holds on to some of the most tense moments I can think of in any contemporary thriller film. It really puts you on the edge of your seat with its very clear use of sound and set design to tell a story without very much dialogue. Really, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you watch it soon. The film relies so heavily on blocking and cinematography to account for the lack of dialogue within the film, and it makes good use of the entire frame in every shot. You'll find that the subject of any given frame, whether it be an object or a person, will have some kind of significance to the story, regardless of how immediately it becomes apparent. One scene that I think encompasses this really well is near the ending of the first act of the movie. This scene works great as an establishing shot for the quiet and simple farm that the Abbott family have made their home. It really does show a lot. In this shot specifically, I can see the son's longing to drive his dad's truck, just like his dad used to. This really puts into perspective what kind of lives the Abbott family have to live in order to stay safe. So, at first glance, we simply get an insight of the lives of the Abbott family, which allows the audience to empathise with the characters within the film and establish the environment that they inhabit. But this shot is actually very important, as it's referenced again later on in the film in a way that you wouldn't normally notice. Near the end of the film's third act, we find the children in a life-threatening situation. They suddenly rush to the truck as a way to protect themselves from the creature. Only when there is no help, they release the handbrake and escape to safety. The film doesn't make this shot a huge part of the plot when it's first seen at the beginning of the film, but it's definitely there, integrated into a montage that at first glance simply establishes where the Abbott family lives to tell us a little bit about each character. The filmmakers made a clear decision to include the shot of the son practicing a handbrake maneuver early in the film. This was done as a way to justify their escape within the third act. And so what I'm getting at is this little detail was included for and is known as a Chekhovs gun. This is a really simple narrative device used by filmmakers, scriptwriters, authors, and playwrights to connect parts of their story together and maintain a coherent relationship between characters, objects, and environments that transcend scenes. It comes from the Russian storyteller Anton Chekhov, who had famously wrote, "If you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter, it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it simply shouldn't be hanging there." This little narrative device really restricts what can be included in the film and makes sure that no precious screen time is lost on unimportant aspects of the story. Some other examples include the whiskey bottle found at the beginning and the end of the film 10 Cloverfield Lane, the geologist's hammer that Andy Dufresne uses within The Shawshank Redemption, and finally, one of the most obvious examples being the rifle hanging on the wall of the Winchester in Shaun of the Dead. I think that the writer Edgar Wright included this incredibly obvious Chekhov's gun as a kind of intertextual part of the film, as a nod to fellow storytellers watching. The technique is notably important within films, and can be quite noticeable as absent when there is an aspect of the story that's missing or simply isn't given a resolution. A good example of this is the stature of Captain Phasma in Star Wars: A Force Awakens. She is set up to be a menacing figure towards Finn and other members of the Resistance, being singled out with her unique silver stormtrooper uniform and the reaction from Finn in his interactions with her. In the end, she makes no discernible threat towards Finn or the Resistance, and is killed as one of the many casualties of the Dreadnought being destroyed in the next episode of the series. We don't get any kind of resolution from her. This is because the proverbial gun that was established in the first act of the film never goes off, and the audience is left with unresolved feeling towards the character. This could have been avoided had Phasma's character had less of an impact within the film and wasn't singled out as a specific antagonist that the audience expect to be justified and resolved in some way by the end of the film. This is otherwise known as a Chekhovs Misfire, where some aspects of the story that have been specifically focused on just don't get resolved, where a gun is shown in the first act but never goes off for the rest of the film. Obviously this rule is very broad, but in most cases it's very relevant. There are a few different options for writers to be creative with it, making up more subtle instances of Chekhov's gun. One of my favourite instances in any film is the conversation that Theodore has with his computer while setting up his new OS, Samantha, in the beautiful film Her. He tells it that his main problem with his relationship with his mother is that every time he would talk about his life, her reaction would be about her.
How would you describe your relationship with your mother?
It was fine, I think. Well, actually, I think the thing I always found frustrating about my mom is, you know, if I tell her something that's going on in my life, her reaction is usually about her. It's not about...
Thank you. Please wait as your individualized operating system is initiated.
This sentiment is then displayed repeatedly throughout the film in the interactions that Theodore has with the people around him. The way that the characters talk about themselves as a response to Theodore clearly pushes him away, which makes his relationship with Samantha a lot easier to understand, due to the contrasted way that he talks with her in comparison to most other people in the film.
I'm going on a date.
What? That's...
Hey,
Hey.
what are you guys doing?
Amy was going to show me some
Theodore is making...
I'm going on a date. Cool.
So this is like so unformed, probably not even worth watching.
Just push play.
If we didn't have this little piece of information, then we might find it harder to accept the relationship between Samantha and Theodore as an OS and a person having a relationship. This can be seen as a way to show that relationships are a lot more than the interactions we have with people, and that the ability to talk and connect with someone is so much more about content and empathy than the actual interaction we have with someone. So with that little piece of information from Theodore that acts as a Chekhov's gun, the interactions from everyone else are an opportunity for the gun to go off in his mind. Integrating this little detail into the film was absolutely done on purpose and tells you a lot about the characters he meets based on his interactions with them. And so, Chekhov's gun can be a lot more complicated than simply featuring something in a scene to further the story. It can be used to add details that reinforce ideas that are otherwise difficult to get across. Although it's quite simple, the technique has been used for a few hundred years and for good reason. These stories are told in such a short amount of time that we can't risk dwelling on unimportant aspects of the film that the audience will take time to process, only to find that they don't have enough information to come to a conclusion. And so, in some cases, it means that the filmmakers have to tell the audience twice.
Why these children?
Well, I was just very moved by what the kind of work they're doing there, and you got to start somewhere. And luckily, you know, the casino business is doing well, and that's all it needs. That's all the motivation that one needs.
Thank you for being an angel to us.
No, thank you.
Thank
Like
you,
I
Terry
said, well, I'm
Benedict.
just following her lead.
Thank you, Terry Benedict. We'll be right back.
Film is such an interesting subject to cover, since there are so many aspects of production that you can look at. And so I'm looking forward to making more videos about all of the things that I enjoy about making films. And so I hope to see you all soon when those videos come out. In my last video, I asked you to write "World's Finest Grain" in the comments. And so this time I'd like you to write "Cocoa Blonde" to tell me you made it through the whole video. Again, my name is James Hayes. I hope you've had a brilliant start to the new year, and thank you so much for watching.